VP Hook. She had nothing left. No home, no family, and nowhere to hide. Then, on the coldest night of 1887, a lonely cowboy opened his cabin door and found a frightened woman standing in the snow. He had no idea that letting her inside would change both their lives forever. What he discovered about her past would force him to make the hardest choice of his life. But before we begin, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional Old West stories. Now let's get started. The winter wind screamed across the empty Wyoming plains as 26-year-old Clara Bennett walked through the snow with a small cloth bag pressed tightly against her chest. Her boots were soaked, her brown coat was torn at the sleeve, and every breath escaped her lips like smoke. Behind her, the distant town lights had already disappeared. She had been walking for hours, but she dared not stop. Clara had nowhere to go. Her father was dead, her uncle had taken the family farm, and the man she had trusted had betrayed her. She had spent 3 nights sleeping in abandoned barns, but tonight the storm was too powerful. Her fingers were becoming numb. She knew that if she stayed outside much longer, she might not survive. Then, through the curtain of snow, she saw a small wooden cabin beneath a ridge. A thin line of smoke rose from its chimney. Clara stopped. Fear told her to keep walking, but exhaustion forced her toward the door. She knocked once. Nothing. She knocked again, weaker this time. The door suddenly opened. A tall cowboy stood there holding a lantern. He was around 35, broad-shouldered with dark hair, a weathered face and tired blue eyes. His name was Samuel Carter. He lived alone on a small ranch several miles from town. Samuel stared at the stranger standing before him. "Ma'am," he asked. Clara tried to speak, but her lips trembled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I just need somewhere warm until morning." Samuel looked at the snow behind her, then at her frozen hands. Without asking another question, he stepped aside. "Come in." Clara hesitated. "You don't know me." Samuel gave a quiet shrug. "You're freezing." "That's enough for tonight." She entered. The cabin was simple but warm. A fire burned in the stone fireplace, and a kettle rested above it. Samuel gave her a blanket and placed another log on the fire. Clara sat near the flames, trying to control her shaking. Samuel prepared a bowl of hot beans and bread. "Eat," he said. "You can explain everything when you're ready." Clara looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Why are you helping me?" Samuel paused. For a moment, his expression became distant. "Because once, someone should have helped my brother." Clara didn't understand, but she could see pain behind his words. She ate slowly, and when the storm grew louder, Samuel gave her the small bedroom while he slept in a chair near the fire. The next morning, Clara woke to sunlight shining through the window. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe. But safety did not last long. 3 riders appeared on the horizon before noon. Samuel noticed them from the porch. His hand moved toward the rifle beside the door. "Do you know those men?" he asked. Clara looked outside and immediately went pale. "They found me." Samuel turned toward her. "Who are they?" Clara's voice shook. "My uncle's men." Samuel studied her face. "Why are they looking for you?" Clara finally told him the truth. Her father had owned a valuable piece of land near the railroad. After his death, Clara's uncle forged papers claiming the property belonged to him. Clara had discovered the truth and threatened to expose him. Her uncle had then accused her of stealing money and sent men to bring her back. Samuel listened silently. "Do you have proof?" he asked. Clara reached inside her bag and pulled out several folded documents. "My father gave these to me before he died. They prove the land belongs to me." Samuel looked at the papers. He knew enough about land deeds to recognize their importance. "Then you don't need to run anymore," he said. Clara shook her head. "They'll never let me reach the courthouse." Samuel looked toward the riders. "Then we'll make sure they don't stop." The men arrived at the cabin shortly afterward. Their leader, a rough-looking man named Wade, demanded Clara come outside. Samuel stepped onto the porch. "She's not going anywhere," Wade laughed. "This doesn't concern you, cowboy." Samuel's voice remained calm. "It does now." The confrontation ended without bloodshed, but Wade warned Samuel that they would return with more men. That night, Clara sat beside the fireplace and told Samuel she would leave before sunrise. "I don't want your life ruined because of me." Samuel looked at her. "Clara, my life has been empty for years. You didn't ruin anything." She lowered her eyes. "You don't even know me?" Samuel smiled faintly. "Neither did I know my brother before I loved him. Sometimes people become important before we understand why." The next morning, Samuel rode with Clara toward the county courthouse. They traveled through narrow trails to avoid the main road. After several hours, they reached town and presented the documents to the sheriff. Clara's uncle arrived soon afterward, furious and confident. But the forged papers he carried were exposed when the sheriff compared them with the original land records. Clara's father had legally left the property to her. Her uncle had no claim. The sheriff arrested him for fraud. Clara stood outside the courthouse, stunned. For years, she had believed she would lose everything. Now, for the first time, she owned her future. Samuel prepared to ride back to his ranch. Clara watched him mount his horse. "You're leaving?" she asked. Samuel nodded. "You have your land now. You don't need me." Clara stepped closer. "Maybe I don't need you to save me anymore." Samuel looked at her. "Then why are you looking at me like that?" Clara smiled through her tears. "Because I don't want you to leave." Samuel slowly climbed down from the horse. "Clara," she reached for his hand. "You opened your door when everyone else closed theirs. You gave me warmth when I had nothing. You believed me when no one else did." Samuel's eyes softened. "And you reminded me that a lonely man can still have something worth coming home." 2 months later, Clara restored her father's land and turned it into a successful ranch. Samuel continued working his own ranch, but he was no longer alone. Every evening, he rode over to Clara's property, and together they watched the sunset over the Wyoming hills. The cabin where Clara had once arrived as a frightened stranger became the place where their story truly began. She had entered that door believing she had nowhere to go. She left it knowing she had finally found somewhere she belonged. Sometimes life doesn't change when we find the perfect road. Sometimes it changes when someone simply opens a door and says, "Come in, you're safe here." Story ending, outrow. And that was the night. Clara discovered that losing everything didn't mean her life was over. It meant she finally had the chance to begin again. Samuel had opened his door to a stranger, but in doing so, he found the person who would bring warmth back into his lonely life. If this story touched your heart like the video, share it with someone who loves emotional Western stories. And subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable tales from the Old West. Until the next story, remember, sometimes one small act of kindness can change an entire life.